Chamomile tea never tasted this sweet. Not until this afternoon, standing at my living room window, watching the garden, knowing the absolute quiet of this house belongs to me now. All of it. Sometimes peace doesn't come flying in like a white dove out of the storybooks we read to children. Sometimes you build it yourself, slowly, with trembling hands. You close the right door at exactly the right moment, and you never look back. Today, I breathe without the weight on my chest. A few months ago, the air vanished every time the phone rang or a car engine idled at the curb outside my house. People think a quiet old woman means defeat, resignation. They think we run out of fight. They're wrong. Dead wrong. Our silence is often where we finish burying the hope that things will change. It's also where we start building our armor. The 5 o'clock sun lights up the ferns on my windowsill. I water them slowly now, at a pace that used to be forbidden to me. For years, my life was a race against the clock, a marathon of obligations nobody officially assigned me, but that everyone simply expected me to run. When a woman ends up alone in a house that suddenly feels too big, her family assumes her time has no value. Her calendar is blank, her only purpose on earth is to fill the gaps in everyone else's lives. My name is Dorothy. I'm 71 years old. I spent more than 4 decades on my feet, cutting hair, styling brides, covering gray roots, in my little neighborhood beauty shop. I was a hairdresser who held her whole household together with tips and 14-hour days. And when my husband Ray closed his eyes for good 10 years ago, I felt the world collapse. Grief is a strange animal. It eats you from the inside. It hollows you out. And in that hollow space, I let my only daughter Lily move in with all her needs. I was always a woman of easy tears, soft-hearted forever, the kind who'd take the bread off her own plate without being asked. After Ray died, Lily and her husband Derek convinced me the best cure for my sadness was to be useful. That's how I became the silent shadow holding up the structure of their perfect marriage. For years, my routine didn't belong to me. I was up at 6 in the morning, rode a 40-minute bus to my daughter's house on the nice side of town, and had my apron on before they even came downstairs for breakfast. I woke my grandson Austin made his hot chocolate exactly the temperature he liked. I ironed his school uniform, making sure the creases in the pants were sharp, and walked him by the hand to the bus stop. While Lily and Derek headed off to their jobs in glass office towers, I stayed behind in their house. A huge, cold house, full of expensive furniture you couldn't touch and carpets I was afraid to walk on. I washed the dishes they'd left from the night before. I picked up Derek's clothes from the floor. That man believed the ground was a magical laundry basket. I straightened the living room, made lunch for when Austin got home from school, and left dinner in the fridge so all Lily had to do was heat it up when she walked in. Nobody ever officially asked me to be their maid, but if I didn't do it, chaos swallowed them whole and the fights started. So, in my endless need to see my daughter happy, to spare her the exhaustion I'd known in my own youth, I took on the role with a smile. And it wasn't just the physical work. With my small widow's pension and the savings Ray had left me, I covered the little expenses nobody notices but that drain a wallet dry. The grocery list Lily left stuck to the fridge with a magnet, assuming I'd buy it all on my way home. The new shoes for Austin when his old ones broke mid-month. The electric bill Derek forgot to pay, which I settled so the power wouldn't be cut. I slipped folded bills into my daughter's purse when she complained about not making it to the end of the month. Even though they both earned 3 times what I did it in silence. I did it for love. I did it because I believed we were a team, a family held together by mutual care. God, I was blind. And opening my eye cost me dearly. The blindfold didn't fall off all at once. It frayed. But there was one specific day, one particular night when the fabric of my blindness tore completely. It was a Friday early in the month. Lily called me in the middle of the afternoon. Her voice was euphoric, electric, full of that energy she had as a teenager whenever she got something she really wanted. She told me Derek had closed a big deal. A serious chunk of money was coming in, and they wanted to celebrate. Mom put on something nice, she said in that tone of command, dressed up as affection she always used. We're going out to dinner somewhere classy. We'll pick you up at 8. Be ready. Don't make us late for the reservation." I hung up the phone, and warmth spread through my chest. An invitation. A celebration. For one moment, the fatigue in my bones disappeared. I felt part of their success. I thought maybe they finally saw that my silent support at home was what let them focus on their careers and reach that win. I went to my closet with the excitement of a young girl. I ran my fingers over the dark wood of the doors, searching among the clothes I hardly ever wore. I found a blue dress. Ray had given it to me for our last anniversary. It hung a little loose now. Time and wear had stolen a few pounds off me, but with a thin belt, it looked elegant. I found my low black heels, polished them with a cloth, and dug out my real pearl earrings from the jewelry box. My greatest treasure. I did my hair carefully, sprayed a little hairspray to tame the wild gray strands, and put a few drops of an old perfume on my wrists and neck. At 7:30, I was sitting on the edge of the couch, purse in my lap, waiting. At 8, nobody came. At 8:30, the phone stayed silent. By 9:15, the anxiety was gnawing at me. I thought maybe they'd had an accident. Maybe they'd forgotten me. I looked out the window, watching the street empty, the streetlights casting long shadows on the asphalt. Finally, just past 9, I heard the horn. They didn't even get out to ring the bell. Derek just honked from the street. 2 short, dry beeps, like he was hurrying a stranger to move their car. I rushed out, making sure the door was double locked. I walked toward the car, careful not to trip in the dark. When I opened the back door and got in, the air conditioning hit me like ice. "Good evening," I said, trying to hold a smile while I buckled my seatbelt. "Finally, Mom. We thought you'd fallen asleep," Lily said from the passenger seat, checking her lipstick in the vanity mirror. Not an apology for the lateness, not a word about my dress. "I've been ready since 8, sweetheart," I murmured. "Traffic." Derek cut in, starting the car with a jerk. "And we had to wait for Austin's babysitter to show up." That comment stung. They'd hired a young girl from the neighborhood to watch the boy tonight instead of asking me. Which was a relief, honestly. But the way he said it made it sound like I wasn't good enough to watch my own grandson on a night of adult celebration. The drive took almost half an hour. They talked the whole way. Interest rates, investments, the new car Derek wanted, the neighbors remodeling their kitchen. I sat in the back, curled into the cold leather seat, watching the city lights slide past the tinted window, feeling like a forgotten package on the back seat. We arrived at a restaurant in an exclusive part of town. It was called The Summit. Soft uplighting washed over a natural stone facade, and men in suits took cars at the entrance. Derek stepped out, tossed the keys to the valet with that arrogant flick of the wrist that had always grated on me, and walked in with Lily on his arm. I had to hurry to keep up my low heels, clicking awkwardly across the cobblestones. Inside, the place was buzzing, but suffocating. Live jazz, crystal glasses clinking, a perfume of rich sauces and expensive cologne. The hostess led us to a table in the corner. Lily and Derek settled onto the padded banquette together, leaving me the loose chair across from them, my back to the room. A young man with a spotless black vest and white shirt came over. He had a kind smile and tired eyes that reminded me of my own, back in the salon days after 10 hours on my feet. "Good evening. Welcome to the Summit. My name is Ryan, and I'll be your server tonight. Would you like to start with something to drink?" Derek ordered a bottle of imported red wine immediately. Lily asked for mineral water with a slice of lemon. "And for the lady?" Ryan asked, looking at me with genuine courtesy. "Just tap water, please. That's fine," I said shyly. Lily rolled her eyes. "Mom, please. Don't order tap water here. Bring her a bottle of still water, young man." I shrank into my chair a little. Ryan nodded and handed us the menus. Heavy folders bound in dark leather with gold lettering. The moment I opened it, I knew this wasn't a place for people like me. The prices were printed in small type, almost hidden, but the numbers were obscene. A single steak cost more than I spent on groceries for a full week. A knot tightened in my stomach. I knew they made good money, but I also knew how much they complained at the end of every month. My protective mother instinct, the very instinct that had been ruining my life without my noticing, kicked in. I didn't want them spending that much on me. I wanted to spare them the burden. When Ryan came back with the drinks, Derek had already made his decision. He ordered a thick cut of beef medium with truffled asparagus and rosemary potatoes. Lily ordered almond-crusted salmon and some exotic salad I couldn't even pronounce. "And for you, ma'am." Ryan poised his notepad, leaning slightly toward me. I looked at the menu, pretending I was still deciding. I'd already found the cheapest thing on the list. "I'm not very hungry tonight, to be honest," I lied, forcing a kind smile at the young man. "I think I'll just have the seasonal cream of vegetable soup. Just the soup and maybe some bread." Lily frowned at me. "Mom, we're celebrating. Order a real meal. Don't be ridiculous eating soup." "Really, sweetheart, I ate lunch late and my stomach can't handle heavy food at night anymore. The cream soup is perfect," I insisted, clinging to my decision to protect their wallets, assuming, in my endless innocence, that dinner was an invitation. Derek shrugged, uncorking the wine the waiter had just poured for his taste. "Leave her, Lily. If she wants soup, let her have soup. Less expense." The sentence hung in the air, tangled up with the jazz music. I chose to ignore it. He was my son-in-law, the father of my grandson, my daughter's husband. Over the years, I'd swallowed knives sharper than that. Dinner went the way all family events with them went. I was an ornament at the table. They talked about a beach trip they were planning next summer. They argued about whether to book a luxury hotel or rent a house with a private pool. At no point did they use the word "we" to include me. It was obvious I wasn't part of those plans. I ate my cream of vegetable soup in silence. It was lukewarm. It needed salt. But I spooned it down, one bite at a time, dabbing the corners of my mouth with the linen napkin, trying to keep the dignity of my blue dress. I watched my daughter chew her salmon, laugh at her husband's jokes, drink the dark wine that left a purple stain on the rim of her glass. I looked at her and searched her face for the little girl whose scraped knees I used to bandage, the girl whose graduation dress I sewed through the night. But the woman across from me was a stranger. A stranger in expensive clothes with a heart armored in vanity. When they finished their plates, Derek leaned back, patting his stomach with satisfaction. They ordered 2 elaborate desserts and 2 espressos. I politely declined when they offered me something. My stomach had closed. Not because of the soup, because of the crushing loneliness of being surrounded by people. The restaurant clock read nearly 11:30. Ryan came back to clear the last plates, carrying a small black leather folder. The check. The moment of truth. He looked at Derek, then at Lily, then asked the routine question every server asks when a table has more than one person, an innocent professional question. Derek made a vague gesture with his hand, brushing the matter off, reaching into his jacket for his wallet. But before he could pull out his card, before he could speak a single word, my daughter intervened. Lily didn't just answer the young man. She straightened in her seat. She looked me up and down with an expression of pure contempt. And then she raised her voice. Not a murmur, not a discreet instruction. An announcement, a declaration pitched to carry across the restaurant during the lull between jazz numbers. "She pays her own, we're not together on the check." The words cracked through the heavy air like a whip. The echo seemed to bounce off the stone walls. Time stopped. A fork hit a porcelain plate at the next table with a scandalous clink. The blonde woman behind me turned her head to look. Ryan, the waiter, blinked, visibly uncomfortable, a light flush rising on his face. He looked down at his notepad, unable to meet my eyes. The physical impact was devastating. It felt like a bucket of ice water thrown straight at my chest. The air left my lungs, my heart lurched painfully, then started pounding, slamming against my ribs from the inside. "She pays her own." I closed my eyes for a fraction of a second. My mind raced back through every morning I'd woken before dawn to make their breakfast, every afternoon ironing Derek's silk shirts, every electric bill I'd paid with my pension, every bill I'd secretly slipped into Lily's wallet, every year of worn-out knees scrubbing their floors. And there I was, at 71, in my old dress rescued from the back of the closet, publicly disowned over a bowl of cream soup I'd ordered, specifically so I wouldn't spend their precious money. Humiliation is a poison that burns your throat before it ever reaches your stomach. My eyes filled with tears. That was the first reaction, the instinctive one, the sentimental mother I'd always been. The moisture gathered on my lashes, threatening to spill and ruin my face. But then, while I watched the smug expression on my daughter's face, while I noticed Derek not even flinching, absorbed in checking the numbers on the check the waiter had hastily split, something inside me made a metallic sound. A click. A heavy iron door slamming shut in the deepest part of my soul. The tears didn't fall. I held them back. The heat of shame evaporated, replaced by an absolute crystalline, cleansing cold. I was no longer the wounded mother. I was a woman who had finally learned the exact value of her own blood on the open market of indifference. I didn't say a word. I didn't confront her. I didn't make a scene. Because scenes are the weapon of the powerless. And I, in that frozen silence, discovered that my power lay in taking mine back. I smiled. A tiny, fragile, but steady smile. I nodded slowly to the waiter. I picked up my old black leather purse resting on my lap, opened it carefully, took out my woven coin purse. The one Ray had bought me at a town fair so many years ago. My hands didn't shake. I opened the metal clasp. I took out a large bill, enough to cover the inflated cost of the vegetable soup and the bottled water. Then I added another folded bill, a 30% tip for Ryan. I put the money on the table, smoothing the bills with my fingertips. "Take my portion from this young man. Keep the change. Your service was excellent," I said, in a voice so soft and controlled it surprised even me. Ryan took the money, nodding with deep, almost solemn respect, and walked to the register. Lily looked at me sideways. Her expression was unreadable. A mix of annoyance that I hadn't cried the way she expected and that chronic indifference. Derek paid his share with his gold card, signed the receipt without looking, and got up, buttoning his jacket. "Let's go," he ordered. The walk back to the car was a funeral procession. I walked behind them, the night breeze touching my face. The valet brought the truck around. I climbed into the back seat. The engine roared. The drive home was silent as the grave. No radio, nobody talked about the weather, nobody talked about the deal. Their silence was the silence of guilt they didn't want to admit. Mine was the silence of a verdict already passed. I watched the back of my daughter's head from the rear seat. Her perfectly smooth hair. The hair I'd brushed 1,000 times when she was a child. I looked at her, and for the first time in my entire life, I felt absolutely nothing. Not love, not hate, not disappointment. Just a deep, clean, necessary emptiness. We reached my street. Derek stopped the truck in front of my curb, but left the engine running. The headlights lit up my front door. Nobody made a move to get out and walk me to the entrance. Nobody said goodnight, or thank you for coming. I pushed open the car door, stepped out into the cold of early morning, closed the door without slamming it, but firmly. The engine revved behind me immediately, and the tires squealed away down the asphalt. They didn't even wait to see me get inside. Didn't make sure I was safe. I walked up the little concrete path through my garden. My footsteps sounded dry in the night. I reached the porch and pulled out my keys. The metal was cold against my skin. I put the key in the lock, turned it twice, pushed open the dark wood, and stepped into my entryway. The smell of clean floor wax and closed-up rooms welcomed me home. I stood there in the dark purse still hanging from my arm. Slowly, I turned toward the open door. The street outside was completely empty. The streetlight flickered weakly. I reached out, took the doorknob, and pulled. The wood settled into the frame. The metal bolt slid home with a dry click. One final, definitive click in the silence of my house. I turned the deadbolt. I closed the door, and with it I closed the door on my life as their servant. The next morning the sun didn't ask permission to enter my room. It slipped through the slats of the blinds, drawing gold lines across the wool blanket Ray and I had bought on our last trip to the coast. I opened my eyes slowly, feeling the weight of silence in the house. Dense, but strangely peaceful. I turned my head toward the alarm clock on the nightstand, 7:15 a.m. For the last 10 years, at this exact hour, I would have been sitting on the vinyl seat of the bus, watching the city wake through a fogged window, purse pressed to my chest, my mind running through the mental checklist. Thaw the chicken for Lily's lunch, find Austin's gym uniform, make sure Derek's shoes were shined. Not today. Today, my feet stayed under the sheets. The feeling of not being in a hurry was so foreign that my own body seemed confused. My knees ached. A dull, familiar pain I'd always ignored in the morning so I could get through my shift. But this time, I let myself feel it. I massaged my joints slowly, without the urgency of someone who carries the world on her back. I got up slowly. The wood floor creaked under my bare feet, a sound that had always seemed lonely. Today, it sounded like freedom. I went to the kitchen. I didn't turn on the main light, just the little lamp above the stove. I got out my old aluminum percolator, the one that rumbles when the water starts to boil. Derek hated that coffee, said it was too strong, irritated his stomach. He'd forced me to buy a pod machine that made watery, vanilla-flavored drinks. But this morning, I filled the metal basket with the dark coffee I loved, the kind I bought at the neighborhood market. I set it on a low flame. The aroma filled the kitchen thick and comforting. That's when the cell phone I'd left on the dining table the night before started to vibrate. The persistent buzz against the plastic tablecloth shattered the morning peace. I walked over, looked at the screen. Lily. I stood a yard away, watching the device tremble. In another life, I'd have run tripping over chairs, heart in my throat, terrified something terrible had happened. I'd have answered on the first ring, apologizing for not already being at her front door. But the image of the night before, in that restaurant of dim lights and crystal glasses, was burned into my mind with fire. She pays her own. My daughter's voice echoed in my head louder than the phone's buzzing. The phone stopped. Silence returned for 3 seconds. Then it rang again. Lily. I went to the stove, turned off the flame, poured myself a cup, in my favorite mug, thick ceramic, chipped rim. 2 spoonfuls of sugar. I stirred it slowly, listening to the spoon clink, and sat down at the kitchen chair. The phone rang 7 more times over the next hour. I didn't answer a single one. I sipped my coffee in small sips, savoring the heat, feeling that strong drink wake not just my body, but my consciousness. At 9:30, I heard a car screech to a halt in front of my house. I recognized the heavy engine of Derek's truck. Then the violent slam of a door. Hasty, furious footsteps across the front garden. The doorbell, once, twice, 3 times non-stop, then pounding on the wood. Mom, open this door. I know you're in there. Lily's voice was loaded with indignation, not worry. She wasn't afraid I was dead on the living room floor. She was furious because her perfectly oiled machine had jammed. I got up calmly. I'd dressed a while earlier in comfortable pants and a cotton blouse. I walked to the entryway, turned the key, and opened the door. Lily stood on the porch, face red. She wore her gray tailored suit, but her blouse was buttoned wrong, and her usually immaculate hair was disheveled. Her purse hung at an awkward angle, and she gripped her car keys so hard her knuckles were white. What the hell is wrong with you? She burst out without even a good morning. I've called you 10 times. I thought you'd had a heart attack. Good morning, Lily. I'm perfectly fine, as you can see, I answered, keeping my voice low and measured, one hand on the doorframe, making no move to let her in. She blinked, thrown by my calm, but the fury quickly reasserted itself. We're not fine, she yelled, waving her hands in the air. Do you have any idea what chaos my house was this morning? Austin missed the school bus because nobody woke him up on time. I had to drive him myself, and I was late to a major meeting. And Derek had to go to the office in a wrinkled shirt because there wasn't a single ironed one in the closet. Why didn't you tell anyone? I looked into her eyes. I searched for any trace of remorse about the night before, any connection to the mother standing in front of her. There was nothing. Only the brutal demand of a boss to an employee who hadn't shown up for her shift. I didn't come because I don't have to, honey, I said with a clarity that surprised even me. I'm not your housekeeper. I'm not your nanny. Lily's mouth fell open. Her face went from red to pale in a second. Is this about last night? She asked, letting out a short, nervous, incredulous laugh. You're telling me this whole tantrum, ruining our morning, because you got offended by some stupid thing at a restaurant? Mom, please. Don't be childish. You're making drama out of nothing. That word. Drama. It was the weapon she always used to invalidate my feelings. When I cried because Derek threw out my old salon photos, saying they were clutter drama? When it hurt that they didn't invite me to Austin's kindergarten graduation because there were only 2 tickets? Drama. It's not drama, Lily, I said, straightening my back. It's simply that last night you made things very clear. You shouted it across the whole restaurant so there could be no doubt. She pays her own, we're not together, and you're right, we're not together. If we're not together enough to share a bowl of soup, then we're not together enough for me to iron your husband's shirts or make your son's breakfast. From today on, I pay for my own time. You pay for yours. Lily stepped back as if I'd slapped her. Her breathing quickened. You're insane. You're getting revenge on us over a stupid comment? Derek was right. You always take everything personally. We keep you busy so you don't rot with loneliness in this old house. We're doing you a favor by letting you be part of our family. The words were cruel, but they found no soft flesh to sink into. They bounced off the wall of cold I'd forged the night before. I appreciate the favor, Lily, but I don't need it anymore. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have things to do in my old house. I stepped back and began to close the door. She put her hand on the wood to stop it. Mom, enough. I want you at the house at 6:30 tomorrow. Derek has a business lunch and I need you to go to the supermarket. Take your hand off the door, Lily, I interrupted, hardening my voice in a way she'd never heard. I didn't shout. I didn't raise my voice. I just injected ice into every syllable. Or I'll hurt your fingers when I close it. She stared at me, eyes wide, terrified of the stranger inhabiting her mother's body. Slowly, she pulled her hand away. I closed the door slowly until the latch clicked. I stood in the entryway listening to her choke out an insult on the porch. The truck started, tires squealing. I walked to my bedroom. My heart was pounding, but not from anguish, from the adrenaline of breaking my chains. I went to the closet, pushed the clothes aside, and dug into the back under some old shoeboxes. A cedarwood box where I kept my important documents and my memories. I sat on the edge of the bed, opened the box, and took out a black notebook. For years, I'd been methodical with my accounts. The old salon habit of recording every haircut, every dye, every tip had carried over into retirement. I opened it. Pages full of my small, cursive handwriting. I started flipping back through the last 2 years. March, school shoes. Austin, reinforced soles. April, electricity bill. Lily's house, Derek forgot to pay. May, grocery run, imported meats and cheeses. June, spare tire for Derek's truck. August, Austin's soccer uniform. I added the amounts in my head, recalling my daughter's excuses. Mom, lend me this. I'll pay you back on payday. Mom, Derek had an unexpected expense. Save us with the bill. There was never a repayment. Never. I assumed it was my duty to help. Spending Ray's pension and my life savings so they could maintain their glass lifestyle. I kept searching the cedar box until I found a white envelope from the bank. I opened it. A credit card statement. 3 years ago, Lily had cried to me that they needed a card for Austin's medical emergencies, but the bank wouldn't approve them because of an issue with Derek's credit history. In my infinite stupidity, I'd taken out a card in my name backed by my savings and given my daughter an authorized user card. The agreement was that it would only be used for doctors. I reviewed last month's charges: the Swan Boutique, gas station, seafood restaurant, movie streaming subscription, expenses I paid on autopilot every month through automatic debit, never checking the details, blindly trusting my daughter to use the card only for the boy's medicine. I snapped the notebook shut. The dry sound echoed through the empty room. The humiliation at the restaurant wasn't an isolated comment. It was the tip of an iceberg of absolute contempt for my effort and my money. They hadn't just used me as a maid, they'd used me as an ATM. And they still had the nerve to scream in public that we weren't together on a bowl of vegetable soup. I got up from the bed and went to the bathroom mirror. I looked at myself. No longer the hunched woman crying in corners missing her husband. The indignation had sharpened my features. I combed my hair, put on some subtle lipstick, grabbed my leather purse, and left the house. The late morning air was fresh. I walked the streets of my neighborhood. Small houses peeling paint, the neighborhood Lily so despised. 3 blocks from my house sat the bakery. the golden oven. The smell of fresh bread and cinnamon flooded the sidewalk. I pushed the glass door, making the brass bell ring. Behind the counter, wiping down the display cases, was Rachel. Rachel was my age, with vibrant red hair and strong hands from a lifetime of kneading dough. We'd known each other for 30 years. She'd been a client at my salon, and I used to buy Ray's Sunday bread from her shop. In recent years, we'd barely seen each other because I spent my days locked inside my daughter's mansion. At the sound of the bell, Rachel looked up. Her eyes widened. "Dorothy, what a miracle woman!" she exclaimed, setting down her rag and wiping her hands on her apron. "What are you doing here at this hour? I always see you rushing past to the bus stop at dawn, coming back at night like a lost soul." I walked up to the counter, resting my hands on the cool glass. "Not anymore, Rachel. The race is over," I said, a smile rising from deep in my chest. "I came to buy some sweet corn cake. For myself." Rachel studied me. Her eyes, lined with laugh wrinkles, narrowed. Like any good neighborhood woman, she understood silences and routine changes better than any therapist. "You finally retired the slave?" she asked softly, leaning her elbows on the counter. "It's about time, Dorothy. Look at you, pale from being locked in that house that isn't even yours. Kids are like birds. You raise them to fly, not to stay in the nest, demanding you clean up after them." I let out a short, genuine laugh, the kind I hadn't felt in months. "Something like that, Rachel. I realized my time has value, and I've given away too much of it already." "Good for you. I'll wrap up the sweet corn cake you like, on the house. Consider it a liberation party," she said with a wink, dropping the cake into a paper bag. I took the bag, patted her warm hand in gratitude, and left the bakery. The short conversation had given me extra strength. I walked 4 more blocks, crossed the main avenue, and reached my bank branch. The air inside was cold from the air conditioning. I took a number from the machine and sat in the waiting chairs. I didn't have to wait long. After 15 minutes, the digital screen called me to desk 3. Behind the desk sat Lucas, a young account executive in an impeccable blue suit and dark-rimmed glasses. Lucas was a polite young man who'd helped me organize the life insurance paperwork when Ray died. He knew my accounts by heart. "Mrs. Brooks, what a pleasure to see you," he greeted me, standing and offering the chair. "How can I help you today? Problems with the pension?" "No, Lucas. I'm here to make a cancellation." I sat down, placed my purse on my lap, and looked at him steadily. "I want to cancel the additional credit card in my daughter Lily's name, and I want to block any automatic charge linked to my main card that isn't one of my own services." Lucas nodded, typing quickly. "Of course, Mrs. Brooks. Give me a second to get into the system. Here it is, additional card ending in 4020. I'll cancel it right away. Would you like to report it as lost or stolen?" "Report that the holder is canceling it by her own decision. I don't want another cent spent on it." Lucas clicked a couple of times and a printer hummed, spitting out a confirmation form. He handed it to me with a pen. As I signed my name carefully, Lucas adjusted his glasses and looked at me with a flicker of professional curiosity. "You did well coming in today to get your accounts in order, Mrs. Brooks," he commented casually, lowering his voice. "Especially since I imagine you'll want all your capital clean and available for Friday's procedure." I stopped pen halfway through my signature. I looked up slowly. My heart lurched, but I kept my face still as a veteran poker player. "Friday's procedure?" I asked, forcing a neutral tone, as if I'd simply forgotten an unimportant detail. Lucas nodded, assuming I was fully in the loop. "Yes, the mortgage. Your daughter and Mr. Carter were here yesterday afternoon just before closing. They're applying for a very large credit for a house in Pinecrest Estates on the other side of the city. A beautiful property from the file. The problem is Mr. Carter's credit history is saturated. He has a lot of card debt and the system flagged the application for lack of liquidity." The air in the office seemed to thicken. I swallowed discreetly. "And what does my capital have to do with that, Lucas?" I asked, making sure my voice didn't tremble. "Well, Mr. Carter informed us that you'd be acting as his surety. Since you own this house free and clear in your name, and you have a good record, he told us you'd come in Friday to sign the papers to back the mortgage with your deed. In fact, they left the application on hold waiting for your signature. Without you as guarantor, the bank won't lend them a single penny. It's too high a risk for us." Silence fell over me like a heavy blanket of lead. Yesterday afternoon, hours before dinner, hours before they took me to the nice restaurant, hours before Lily shouted in front of everyone that she pays her own and we weren't together. It all clicked into place with disgusting precision. The dinner wasn't a celebration, it was the prelude to a trap. They'd taken me out to keep me happy, to soften me up, to make me feel part of the family, so I'd docilely sign the papers Friday that would put my only property, the house Ray and I built brick by brick, up as collateral for their mansion. And they hadn't even had the decency to treat me with respect during the dinner that was supposed to be my bribe. Their contempt for me was so total, they couldn't even fake politeness for a few hours to secure their business. Derek had said, less expense. Lily had said, we're not together. They looked at me with such disdain, they assumed my submission was absolute. Assumed they could humiliate me publicly on Friday night, and I'd still hand over my house Friday morning. Because that was my duty as a lonely widow mother. A cold, calculating, crystalline anger settled in the center of my chest. Not a shouting rage, the rage of someone who has just figured out how to win a war. Lucas, I said, pushing the signed form toward him. What do I need to do to put a legal lock on my account and my deed? I want to make absolutely sure that nobody, not even my daughter with a power of attorney, can use my property as collateral for anything. I want the system to block any attempt to link my name to that credit. Lucas blinked, startled by the shift in my tone, but his professionalism won out, and he read the situation quickly, without awkward questions. I can place a preventive fraud alert and an absolute restriction on your profile right now. Any transaction involving your property or your signature as guarantor will be automatically rejected by the central system. Unless you come in person, present your identification, and pass a security interview with me. Do it. Right now, I ordered, with a firmness that brooked no argument. Lucas typed for 5 endless minutes. The sound of the keys was the only noise I registered. Like a giant lock clicking shut on the gates of my fortress. Done, Mrs. Brooks. Your profile is locked. The system will automatically reject anyone attempting to link you to a mortgage credit. Thank you, Lucas. You're a good young man. I stood up, took my purse, and walked out of the bank branch. The midday sun hit my face as I crossed the glass doors to the street. The city noise swallowed me, but I walked inside a bubble of triumphant silence. I gripped the strap of my purse. I thought of Lily and Derek probably flipping through catalogs of expensive furniture for their new house in Pinecrest, confident that the stupid old mother would sign her own ruin on Friday. But the stupid old mother had stayed behind at the summit, paying for a bowl of vegetable soup. The woman walking the sidewalk now was someone very different. They had built their house of cards on my silence and my submission, and now I hadn't just walked away from the table. I'd taken the whole table with me. It was only a matter of days before the bank delivered the news. Only a matter of time before reality hit them as hard as their words had hit me. I walked home savoring every step, tasting the sweet corn cake in my bag, ready to watch the clock tick toward the collapse of their arrogance. The walk home from the bank branch was unlike any walk I'd taken in the last 10 years. The noon sun hammered down on the uneven sidewalks of my neighborhood, but I felt no heat. No fatigue. No stabbing pain in my lower back, the one that used to follow me around like a faithful dog. For the first time in a long, long time, I walked with my back completely straight. The air smelled of dry earth and home-cooked stews. The real life I'd been disconnected from while polishing the floors of a glass mansion. Every step on the concrete rang in my ears like a drum marking the beginning of a new era. The old Dorothy, the frightened widow who believed her only value lay in being her own daughter's cleaning rag. She had stayed behind in that chair at the bank, signing her emancipation in black ink. When I reached my door, I opened it with deliberate slowness. I stood on the threshold, looking at the living room. The dark wood furniture, the hand-woven rugs, the family portraits on the mantel. This was my house. Mine and Ray's. Every nail, every brick, every coat of paint had been paid for with hours on my feet at the salon, with the sweat of our brows, with savings we kept in glass jars. And they, with the arrogance of people who believe the world owes them everything for simply existing, had tried to use it as a casino chip to finance their vanity. I closed the door behind me and threw the deadbolt, left my purse on the dining table, and went straight to the kitchen. There was a task waiting, a physical need to purge my space. I went to the corner of the counter where the pod coffee machine sat, that horrible sleek black plastic thing Derek had brought over one Sunday with the excuse that my aluminum percolator gave him heartburn. Really, he'd brought it because he hated the smell of strong, honest coffee. He said it smelled poor. I grabbed the machine by the base. It was still plugged in. I yanked the cord out of the wall with no delicacy at all, found a big trash bag under the sink, snapped it open, and dropped the machine inside. The plastic crunched as it hit the bottom. I didn't stop. I opened the pantry and pulled out one by one everything they'd made me stock for their occasional visits. The boxes of imported cookies Austin would waste with a few bites. The detox teas Lily drank when she was dieting. The jars of strange sauces Derek demanded for his weekend barbecues, which then rotted in the fridge because they never actually came to my backyard. All of it into the black bag. I tied it blind and dragged it to the back door, leaving it by the municipal trash cans. Back in the kitchen, the counter looked bare. Clean. Enormous. I wiped the white tile surface with a damp cloth, breathed deep. My house was mine again. While I made myself a glass of ice water, the cell phone in my purse on the dining table began to ping. A string of short, continuous notifications. I walked over, took out the phone, and looked at the glowing screen. 22 new notifications, all from Lily, 14 missed calls, and 8 voicemails. In the past, that many notifications would have sent me into tachycardia. I'd have assumed Austin was in the emergency room. But now, knowing the only emergency was that they'd lost their maid, I sat down at the dining table, took a sip of ice water, and pressed play on the messages. One after another, like someone listening to a radio program without much interest. The first message was from 10 in the morning. Lily's voice was shrill, breathless from fast walking. "Mom, I don't know what the hell you're playing at with this attitude. Derek is furious. I had to leave my meeting halfway because the cleaning girl doesn't have the keys and you're not here to let her in. You better call me the minute you hear this. We don't have time for your little girl games." The second sent an hour later had a different tone. The anger had given way to operational frustration. "Mom, answer. Austin can't find his soccer shoes for this afternoon's practice and I don't know where you put them. The boy is crying and I have a splitting headache. Please, stop this absurd drama and come to the house. I'll pay for the taxi. Just come." I let the messages play automatically. The third and fourth were variations of the same complaint. Unfolded laundry, unmade food, the chaos that erupted when the invisible pillar holding up their lives decided to step aside. But the seventh message, sent just after noon, made me smile with a cold bitterness. Lily had changed tactics completely. The shrill voice was gone, replaced by a honeyed, almost childish tone. The fake voice she used when she wanted to borrow money. "Mommy, hi. I know we started the day badly, and maybe last night at dinner we were a little harsh. You know how work stress is. Derek's under a lot of pressure with the new project, and sometimes we take it out on the people who least deserve it. Austin misses you so much. He asked me where his grandma was. Listen, let's just wipe the slate clean. Tomorrow, Thursday, I'll pick you up mid-morning. We'll have breakfast, just you and me, and then you can come to the house. Also, remember Friday we have that little errand at the bank? The one Derek mentioned last week? It's a quick little favor. Love you, Mommy. Call me." I turned off the screen and left the phone face down on the wood table. The silence in my dining room was so deep, I could hear the tick of the wall clock. A quick little favor. That's what she called putting my roof, my security, my entire old age up as collateral, so they could wear a rich facade in a gated neighborhood. They thought a cheap breakfast and a few sweet words could erase years of public humiliation and servitude and secure my signature on that paper. The indignation didn't burn anymore. It was a solid block of ice in the center of my chest. I wasn't going to answer. I wasn't going to block her number either. I was going to let the silence do its work, let the uncertainty eat them alive while the clock crept toward their deadline. The rest of Tuesday passed in absolute peace. I watered my ferns, watched a gardening show on TV, ate a bowl of warm oatmeal for dinner, slept 8 straight hours without interruption, a luxury my body deeply appreciated. Wednesday morning dawned cloudy with a cool breeze promising rain. I was on the front porch sweeping dry leaves the wind had piled at the entrance when I saw a woman approaching down the sidewalk. She walked with a firm step, leaning lightly on a closed umbrella she used as a walking stick. She wore a sand-colored coat and a silk scarf tied at her neck. It was Nora. Nora had been a client of my salon for over 20 years, a widow like me with a teacher's pension that let her live comfortably. She was a classy woman. Few words, but sharp observations. We weren't close friends, not the kind who share secrets, but we shared the mutual respect of two women who'd worked hard their whole lives. After I closed the salon, we lost daily contact, seeing each other only now and then, at the bakery or the pharmacy. I stopped, hands resting on the broom handle as she approached the little iron fence. "Good morning, Dorothy," Nora said, stopping to adjust her scarf. "I see you're busy early. And you look different. Less tired, I'd say." "Good morning, Nora. I had a good night, I suppose. Rest works miracles," I answered with a kind smile. "Are you heading to the market? If you want, come in for a minute. I just made fresh coffee." Nora hesitated a second, glancing at the empty street, then nodded slowly. She pushed open the iron gate and walked up the path to the porch. I set the broom aside and led her inside. As I went to the kitchen to pour 2 steaming cups of coffee and arrange some butter cookies on a ceramic plate, I felt a strange curiosity. Nora wasn't a woman for casual mid-morning visits. When I returned to the living room, she was perched on the edge of the sofa, holding her purse on her lap with both hands. I handed her the cup. Vapor spiraled toward the ceiling. Nora took a small sip, closed her eyes in appreciation, then set the cup down with a delicate clink. She looked me straight in the eyes. Her expression was serious, stripped of all surface courtesy. "Dorothy, I'm not going to beat around the bush. I didn't come for your coffee recipe or to talk about the weather," she began in that clear, direct voice of a retired teacher. "Friday night, my eldest son took me to dinner for my birthday. We went to a lovely restaurant, The Summit. I don't know if you know it." The restaurant's name hit the air of my living room. I didn't flinch. I held my cup between my hands, feeling the warmth through the porcelain, and met her gaze without blinking. I nodded slightly, giving her permission to continue. "We were sitting 2 tables away from yours," Nora went on, lowering her voice as if we were in church. "I saw you arrive with your daughter and son-in-law. I saw you sit with your back to the room. And unfortunately, I heard everything that happened at the end of dinner. Everyone heard it, Dorothy. That girl of yours has lungs an opera singer would envy." A slight warmth crept up my neck. The shame of the memory tried to resurface. I suppressed it immediately. There was nothing to be ashamed of on my side of the story. "You heard what she shouted?" I asked, voice serene, almost clinical. "She pays her own. We're not together on the check," Nora quoted with mathematical precision. "She shouted it like you were a stranger who'd attached herself to their table to steal their food." I saw the waiter go red. I saw the man at the next table drop his fork. And I saw you, Dorothy. I saw you open your coin purse, place your bill with a dignity that girl will lack for the rest of her life, and walk out without spilling a single tear. I let out a long breath, but I kept my face still. Nora leaned forward, bringing her face closer to mine. Her dark eyes gleamed with a mix of borrowed outrage and something deep and serious. Respect. "I came today because knowing your daughter, I'm certain she's trying to convince you that you were the one at fault, that you did something wrong, that you provoked her, that you're the one making drama. Selfish children are experts at rewriting history so they don't have to face the monsters they are. I came to tell you as an eyewitness, as a woman who's known you for 20 years, you're not crazy. What they did to you was unforgivable. And if you ever doubt your decision to walk away, remember that I saw your son-in-law's face while she was humiliating you." He smiled, Dorothy. A small, miserable smile of superiority. "They are rotten inside." Nora's words fell on my soul like a healing balm that still stung. They cured, but they burned. That external validation, the confirmation that the atrocity wasn't a figment of my sensitive mind, it finished forging the steel of my resolve. It was no longer a private offense. It was a public display of their cruelty. And if they'd chosen the public stage to disown me, then they'd have no escape when the consequences caught up with them under that same pitiless light. "Thank you for coming to tell me this, Nora," I said, setting my cup on the coffee table. "You're right. They've been calling to tell me I'm exaggerating. But the Dorothy who believed their lies stayed behind at that restaurant paying for soup. The one sitting here is no use to them anymore." Nora nodded, satisfied. She finished her coffee, we chatted a few more minutes about harmless neighborhood news, and she left before the rain started. That visit was the missing piece of my armor. I felt invincible. But the real test came Thursday morning, around 11. Under a gray sky with the pavement still damp from the overnight drizzle, I was in the living room folding clean laundry when I heard the unmistakable roar of an 8-cylinder engine. Derek's black truck pulled up in front of my house, taking up nearly the entire front of my property. I went to the window and moved the lace curtains slightly. I watched him get out. He wore an impeccable navy suit, polished shoes that caught the dim light, and in one hand, he carried a small white cardboard box tied with a gold string. From the fancy bakery downtown. The in-person bribe had arrived. He walked up the path with long, confident strides, radiating that self-assured businessman confidence that believed every problem in the world could be solved with an expensive pastry and a few well-turned phrases. The doorbell rang. 2 short rings and 1 long. Always his ring. I went to the door, unlocked the deadbolts calmly, and turned the knob. I stood on the threshold, not smiling, not frowning, a sphinx. "Mother-in-law, good morning," Derek exclaimed with a wide smile that didn't reach his eyes. His tone was jovial, excessively enthusiastic, pretending the storm of the past days had never existed. "I was passing by, just coming from a meeting with some important clients, and I remembered how much you love the apple tarts from this place. I brought you one so we can have it with a little coffee. Won't you let me in?" I looked him up and down. The white box in his right hand, his relaxed posture, his absolute certainty that I would step aside and let him into my house like I always had. "Good morning, Derek," I said, my voice flat, empty of emotional inflection. "Come in." I stepped aside. He came in, wiping his shoes on the mat, and walked to the living room like he owned the place. He set the pastry box on the dining table and settled into the armchair, the one where Ray used to read the Sunday paper. Watching him occupy that sacred space with his arrogance churned my stomach. But I didn't let my face show a thing. I sat on the sofa across from him, hands folded in my lap. I didn't offer coffee. I didn't offer plates for the tart. I just looked at him and waited. Silence filled the room. Derek shifted uncomfortable, coughed lightly, loosened his tie. Accustomed to me filling silences with questions about his work or about Austin, my muteness threw him off. "Well, mother-in-law," he began, planting his elbows on his knees and switching to a more intimate, understanding tone. "Lily mentioned there've been some misunderstandings these past days, that you're a little hurt about Friday. I came to tell you, man to woman, that sometimes Lily's tongue runs away with her. You know how she is. Impulsive. Just like you when you get angry. The stress of the house, the boy, it all adds up. But we love you very much. You're the pillar of our family." Hearing the word pillar come out of his mouth was almost comic. I wasn't the pillar. I was the foundation buried in the mud, the thing they walked on every single day. I didn't respond. I held eye contact. My silence was a wall. His words hit it and fell to the floor. He cleared his throat again, visibly irritated by my lack of response, but forced the smile back onto his face. He had an agenda to complete, a signature to secure by tomorrow. "Anyway, no need to make a storm in a teacup," he continued, waving a hand in the air like he was shooing a fly. "The important thing is that we're family, and family sticks together. I wanted to take the opportunity to confirm tomorrow. I already spoke to the bank. The executive is expecting us at 10 in the morning at the downtown branch. I'll pick you up at 9:30. It's a quick procedure, a few signatures. We bring the copies of your deed, which we already have in our files, and done. From there we'll go celebrate, properly this time. Does that sound good?" At 9:30. The sheer monumental nerve of it. He wasn't asking whether I was willing to be his guarantor. He was giving me instructions, assuming my obedience was a fixed condition of nature like gravity. He wanted my deed, he wanted my house, he wanted my future, all in exchange for an apple tart and a half-hearted apology that blamed his own wife. I thought of Lucas, the bank executive. I thought of the fraud alert and the absolute restriction glowing red in my file at this very moment. I thought of the face Derek would make when the system spat back the truth. The stupid old woman wasn't so stupid after all. I kept my composure. I wasn't going to reveal my hand. I wasn't going to give him a chance to hunt for another victim or to build an alternative plan. I wanted the blow to land at the exact moment he believed he'd already won. I nodded slowly. A vague, unspecific movement. "Tomorrow will be the day it has to be, Derek," I said, drawing the words out with sepulchral calm. He took that nod as absolute victory. His face lit up with relief and triumph. He stood, quickly slapping his thighs, eager to leave my house, now that his mission was complete. "Perfect mother-in-law. I knew we could count on you. Mothers are always there to support, aren't they? Well, I'll let you enjoy the tart. See you tomorrow at 9:30 sharp. Be ready. We don't want to keep the banker waiting." He walked to the door. I followed without another word. He stepped onto the porch, bounded down the steps, and climbed into his truck. The engine roared and he drove off, leaving me alone with the city noise. I went back inside and straight to the dining table. I picked up the white cardboard box with the apple tart. I carried it to the kitchen, opened the back door, lifted the lid of the trash can, the one where I'd thrown the pod coffee machine the day before. I dropped the whole box in on top of the black bags. The gold strings soaked up the old coffee grounds. I closed the kitchen door. The clock read 12 noon on Thursday, 22 hours until the bank appointment. I went to my bedroom and opened the closet. I needed to prepare what I'd wear tomorrow. My eyes passed over the blue dress from the night of humiliation. I took it off the hanger, folded it carefully, and put it in the back of a drawer. That dress belonged to a woman who no longer existed. In its place, I took out a two-piece suit, gray, the color of lead. I'd bought it years ago for a hairdresser's convention and rarely worn it. It was elegant, structured, sharp lines, a suit for doing business. Or, in my case, for taking it apart. I hung it on the closet door, ready for the morning. I ironed the white blouse that would go with it, making sure the collar was perfectly stiff. I polished my black, square-heeled shoes. In the afternoon, I sat at the little kitchen table with my account notebook open. I reviewed the numbers one more time. The astronomical sums that had drained my savings over the past years. The tears of frustration that used to accompany that review were gone. Now those numbers were evidence of my own blindness, a reminder of why I couldn't afford to feel even a sliver of pity for them. They'd crossed the line. Not when they yelled at me in the restaurant, but every single time they accepted my money, knowing I was left with the bare minimum. Night fell over the city, bringing a thunderstorm that hammered the windows. As the rain lashed the roof, I packed my black purse, my phone fully charged, my wallet, my keys, a small foldable umbrella. I went to the nightstand, picked up the wind-up alarm clock, and set the alarm. Not for 6 in the morning, the hour slaves get up to serve. I set it for 8. I was going to sleep deeply. I was going to have breakfast with sweet corn cake and strong coffee. I was going to dress with the calm of a queen preparing for her coronation. I got under the thick sheets, listening to the thunder rumble in the distance. The machinery was in motion. The pieces were on the board. The clock was ticking relentlessly toward Friday morning. I closed my eyes. Mind cold, heart armored. Tomorrow, Derek and Lily would learn the true meaning of the phrase they'd coined themselves. Tomorrow, they'd realize that, indeed, we were no longer together on the check, and the bill the bank presented would leave them in absolute ruin. The metallic ring of the wind-up alarm clock cut through the silence of my bedroom at exactly 8 in the morning. No jolt. No spike of adrenaline ripping me out of bed like the old days when I lived in terror of my daughter's schedules. This time I opened my eyes with majestic slowness, feeling the dull light of the cloudy sky filter through the blinds, painting gray stripes across the wood floor. I lay there 5 more minutes simply listening to the sound of my own breathing. The air in the house was cold, but my lungs expanded with an ease I'd forgotten. No uniforms to iron. No breakfasts to make against the clock. No shadow of someone else's urgency dictating the rhythm of my heartbeat. Today, time belonged entirely to me. Every tick of the second hand was one more step toward the demolition of the tyranny that had held me captive. I got up slowly, savoring the familiar creak of the floorboards under my feet. I went to the bathroom, washed my face with ice-cold water to finish waking my senses, and looked in the mirror. The dark circles that had accompanied me for years seemed less deep. There was a new hardness in the line of my jaw, a firmness in my gaze that reminded me of the woman I used to be, the one who built a business from nothing and asked no one's permission to exist. I walked to the closet and took down the gray suit. The fabric was heavy, well-draped, structured with the severity of armor. I put it on with calculated movements, buttoned the white blouse to the collar, making sure the cuffs peeked out perfectly under the jacket sleeves. Slipped on the black, square-heeled shoes, the ones that rang with authority on pavement. Looking at myself full length in the hallway mirror, I didn't see the submissive widow or the eager grandmother. I saw a businesswoman about to close the most important deal of her life. I went to the kitchen and prepared breakfast with a surgeon's care. Toasted 2 slices of the sourdough bread I'd bought the day before, spread real butter on them, poured myself a cup of thick, steaming black coffee. I sat at the dining table, the same table where I'd so often left folded bills for my daughter to take without a thank you, and I ate in absolute silence. I chewed slowly, savoring the contrast of salted butter against the bitterness of the coffee. At 9:15, I washed my cup, dried it with a clean cloth, and put it in the cupboard. I picked up my black leather purse, checked that my ID and keys were inside, and sat on the living room sofa, hands folded in my lap to wait. The horn sounded at 9:30 on the dot. 2 short, sharp, impatient toots, the acoustic signature of my son-in-law's arrogance. I didn't hurry. I let the echo of the horn die in the street before I stood up. Walked to the door, turned the bolt, and stepped onto the porch. The morning air was heavy with humidity, threatening imminent rain. Derek was parked in front of my curb in his enormous black truck. He hadn't even turned off the engine. When he saw me, he lowered the passenger window and made an impatient gesture with his hand, telling me to get in quickly, as if I were a package he was picking up in a no-loading zone. I came down the steps at a steady pace, ignoring his haste, and opened the heavy vehicle door. Inside, the smell of new leather and expensive cologne. "Good morning, mother-in-law. Punctual as always. I like that," Derek said, not looking at me, focused on his phone screen as he worked the wheel one-handed. "Put on your seatbelt. We're on a tight schedule. The bank executive is very strict about appointments." "Good morning, Derek," I answered in a tone so flat it carried no emotion at all. I pulled the seatbelt across and let the buckle click. He pulled away with a jerk, pressing me into the seat. For the first 10 minutes of the drive, he pretended I didn't exist. He made a call through the truck's speaker system. It was the contractor for the new house in Pinecrest Estates. I listened to him talk about imported quartz countertops for the kitchen, a heating system for the pool, and the installation of an underground wine cellar. He spoke about obscene amounts of money, sums that exceeded what I'd earned in 10 years of cutting hair, with the ease of someone buying a pack of gum. As his voice filled the cabin with descriptions of needless luxury, a memory surfaced in my mind with the force of a physical blow. The first sharp, painful memory I used to sharpen the blade of my resolve. I saw myself 35 years ago standing in a dusty notary's office in a rundown part of downtown. Suffocating heat. Ray beside me, wearing his only dress shirt sweat-soaked across the back, his hands rough and permanently stained with grease from years in the auto shop, trembling slightly. In front of us, a bored lawyer pushing a stack of papers and a rubber stamp. The deed to our house. This house. The same one I lived in now. I remembered the weight of the pen when I signed. I remembered Ray wiping a furtive tear with the back of his hand as we stepped out into the street, looking at me with shining eyes. "We have a roof now, my love. Nobody can ever throw us out of here. This is for you and the little girl." We'd eaten rice and beans for 5 years to save the down payment. We'd given up vacations, new clothes, medicine for his back pain. Every brick of that house was cemented with our exhaustion, our blood, our absolute love for a future. And now the man sitting beside me in a climate-controlled truck planned to use that altar of sacrifice as a step up to finance a heated pool I would never once set foot in. The obscenity of it churned my stomach. I pressed my lips together and kept my eyes fixed on the windshield. My silence wasn't submission. It was the taut calm of a hunter who already has the prey in her sights. Yeah, tell the architect I approve the black marble for the main bathroom, Derek concluded, hanging up. All right, mother-in-law. Everything's rolling. The moment we sign today, the bank releases the funds Monday, and we start the remodel Tuesday. Lily's thrilled. She's already waiting for us at the branch. I said nothing. I let his monologue die in the cold air conditioning. We reached the main bank branch, an imposing building of glass and steel in the heart of the financial district. Derek handed the keys to the valet with his usual disdain and walked to the main entrance. I followed at my own pace, feeling the weight of my shoes on the granite pavement. There, standing by the revolving doors, was Lily. She wore a beige wool coat that looked straight off a fashion magazine, perfectly straight hair, a designer bag hanging from her arm. When she saw me, her face lit up with a rehearsed plastic smile. "Mommy!" she exclaimed, taking 2 steps forward and wrapping me in a superficial hug that barely touched me. "Wow, you look so elegant today. That gray suit is beautiful on you. It makes you look very executive." The honeyed, condescending tone sent a chill down my spine. This was the same voice she'd used in the 7th voicemail, the voice of pure manipulation. "Thank you, Lily. It seemed appropriate for the occasion," I answered, pulling back with a subtle but firm movement, avoiding direct eye contact. We entered the bank. The temperature shift was drastic. The air conditioning ran at full blast, and the ambient sound was a constant murmur of keyboards, printers, and low voices. The smell of clean money, fresh paper, industrial cleaning products filled the vast white marble lobby. Derek walked straight toward the account executive's area, moving with the confidence of a man who believes he owns the building. Lily walked beside me, trying to take my arm, but I kept my purse pressed against my side, forcing her to walk empty-handed. As we crossed the long hallway toward the private offices, a second memory rose from the depths of my mind with brutal precision. 3 years ago, the waiting room of a private hospital. Austin had a severe stomach infection and had been admitted overnight. Derek was away on a business trip, and Lily, panicked, had called me at dawn to come with her. I spent 2 full nights sleeping in a rigid plastic chair, giving the boy water with a spoon, while Lily slept on the hospital room's pull-out sofa. When they discharged him, we went to the hospital cashier. The bill was high. Lily swiped her gold credit card. Declined. Insufficient funds. She tried another. The machine beeped the same error. The cashier looked at her with impatience. Lily's eyes, filling with frustrated tears, turned to me. "Mom, please save me. Derek will kill me if he finds out I maxed out the cards on clothes. You pay. I swear on my life I'll pay you back Friday." I took out my old debit card, the one holding my pension savings, and I paid the entire hospital bill. That same afternoon, while I made chicken broth for Austin in their kitchen, I saw Lily sitting on the couch, tearing open a messenger package. An Italian leather purse. It cost exactly twice what I'd paid at the hospital. She never repaid me. When I mentioned it a month later, she said counting money between family was bad taste. The echo of that bad taste rang in my ears as we approached the frosted glass office with a gold plaque on the door. Lucas, the young executive who'd helped me 2 days before, was standing to greet us. Beside him stood an older man in a flawless dark suit, silver hair, metal frame glasses. "Good morning, Mr. Carter." "Mrs. Carter?" "Mrs. Brooks, what a pleasure to see you again," Lucas said, maintaining a perfectly neutral professional expression. There wasn't a hint of complicity in his face, but I knew he had his finger on the trigger. "Please come in. Allow me to introduce the branch manager, Mr. Harrington. He'll be with us to authorize the final release of the mortgage funds." "Excellent, excellent. Let's get straight to business, gentlemen. Time is money," Derek said, shaking Mr. Harrington's hand with excessive force and taking the biggest leather chair behind the desk. Lily sat beside him, crossing her legs elegantly. I sat in the end chair, placing my black purse on my lap, keeping my back perfectly straight. Mr. Harrington took his place behind the desk, adjusted his glasses, and turned on his monitor. Lucas stood beside him, holding a folder of documents. The silence in the office thickened. The only sound was the quick, rhythmic clicking of the manager entering passwords into the bank's central system. "Very well, Mr. Carter," Harrington began, in the deep, measured voice typical of men who handle other people's money. "I have your file for the mortgage credit on the property in Pinecrest Estates. The amount requested is substantial. As we discussed, due to the saturation of your current credit lines, approval of this loan is strictly conditioned on the presentation of a joint guarantor with unencumbered property. In this case, Mrs. Brooks, your mother-in-law." "That's right. Here she is ready to sign. We already brought the copies of her deed last week. Just tell us where to put the signature and let's get this done," Derek replied, pulling a gold fountain pen from his inside jacket pocket and placing it on the table with a loud click. Harrington nodded slowly. A few more clicks of his mouse, the monitor cast a faint blue glow across his face. Then suddenly the sound in the office changed. The system emitted a low beep, an electronic alert that sliced through the air. Mr. Harrington frowned. He leaned closer to the screen, reading the information that had just appeared. His expression shifted from bureaucratic complacency to absolute seriousness. He looked up straight at Derek. "Mr. Carter, I'm afraid we have a serious impediment in the system," Harrington said, folding his hands on the desk. "The transaction cannot proceed. The system has automatically blocked the operation." Derek let out a short, nervous, condescending laugh. "An impediment? Must be an error in your network. These computers fail sometimes. Restart the program. We'll wait. We have the capital. We have the guarantor present. There's no problem." "This is not a computer error, sir," Harrington replied, hardening his tone. "The central system has issued a red alert of absolute restriction on the property you're attempting to use as collateral. Mrs. Brooks's deed carries a legal lock and an active preventive fraud alert." Lily leaned forward. Her plastic smile dissolved completely. "Fraud alert? What are you talking about? That house is my mother's. It's paid off. No mortgage. Nobody's committed any fraud. This is ridiculous." Harrington turned the screen slightly so they could see the blinking red box in the system, though from their angle, they couldn't read the fine details. "The restriction was not placed by an external third party, Mrs. Carter," the manager explained with the precision of a scalpel. "The preventive fraud alert and the absolute lock on the use of the deed were requested, authorized, and signed in person by the sole owner of the property. That is, your mother. Nobody can use that house as collateral for any credit. The system prohibits us from even printing the contracts." The silence that followed was absolute. Dense, heavy. The sound of the air conditioning seemed to vanish. Derek froze hand halfway to retrieving his gold pen. His face, normally tanned and arrogant, lost all color, turning a sickly ashen shade. He blinked 3 times slowly, as if his brain refused to process the banker's words. Lily snapped her head toward me with the speed of a whip crack. Her eyes were bulging, full of confusion, terror, and a dawning rage. "Mom." Her voice trembled, all the fake sweetness gone now, high and desperate. "What is this man talking about? What did you do?" Derek finally reacted. He half rose from his chair, slamming his hands on the glass desk. "I demand an explanation," he shouted at the manager, all composure gone. "This is sabotage. You can't deny me the credit on signing day. I have contracts with builders, deposits paid." "Sir, I'm asking you to lower your voice," Harrington warned, remaining impassive. "The bank has nothing to do with this. We simply follow our customers' security directives. The owner blocked her property. Without that guarantee, your mortgage application is officially denied for lack of liquidity and excess debt. There is nothing more we can do here." Lily jumped up, came over to me, and grabbed my right arm with force. Her nails bit through the fabric of my gray suit. "Mom, tell them it's a mistake," she demanded, through clenched teeth, desperation distorting her perfect features. "Tell them you didn't know what you signed. Tell them you were confused. Tell them to remove the restriction right now. For God's sake, you're going to ruin us. Derek already paid the contractor's deposit with money we don't have. Tell them to take it off." It was at that precise instant, feeling the pressure of her fingers on my arm, seeing the absolute panic in the eyes of the man who'd treated me like a servant for 10 years, when the third and final memory crossed my mind. Not a memory of pain, a memory of love. I remembered the day Austin was born. I remembered holding that tiny baby, wrapped in white blankets at the hospital, looking at his miniature face, making a silent promise. I will protect this family with my life. For years, I believed protecting them meant absorbing every blow, covering their irresponsibility, draining my pockets so they'd never feel the cold of reality. I believed a mother's love meant infinite martyrdom. But there, sitting in that glass office with the cold light exposing the cowardice and greed of my daughter, I understood the greatest truth of my life. Protecting a family doesn't mean feeding the parasites that destroy it. Sometimes the most loving act a mother can perform is letting her children crash into the wall of their own consequences. I looked at Lily's hand gripping my arm. I raised my left hand, and with a slow, deliberate movement filled with a strength she didn't know I had, I peeled her fingers off my suit one by one. I pushed her back gently. I stood. I smoothed the invisible wrinkles of my jacket. I looked at Mr. Harrington and Lucas, who were watching the scene with almost reverential respect. Then I turned my face toward Derek and Lily. They stood cornered, exposed before strangers, naked in their financial desperation. There's no mistake, Lily. My voice was clear, resonant, absolutely cold, no anger in my tone, only the lethal calm of justice served. I placed that restriction. I'm not taking it off. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever. Derek took a step toward me, fists clenched at his sides, face red with barely contained fury. "You can't do this to us," he bellowed, spitting the words. "We're family. That's our house. You have an obligation to support us. We open the doors of our home to you." I didn't retreat an inch. I held his murderous stare with the tranquility of someone watching a chained dog bark behind a fence. "You didn't open the doors of your home to me, Derek," I answered, each syllable cutting the air. "You opened the doors of your service entrance. You used me to clean your filth, raise your son, and pay the bills your vanity couldn't cover, and I let you. Out of love. But last Friday at that restaurant, you did me an enormous favor. You opened my eyes." Slowly, I turned to my daughter. Lily was crying now, real tears of panic trembling head to toe as she watched the house of cards they'd built on my back collapse before her eyes. "You shouted it loudly enough for everyone to hear, sweetheart," I said, dropping my voice to something more pointed, giving the blowback with a surgeon's precision. "You made sure even the waiter knew my place in your life." I looked at her, remembering the humiliation, the heat in my face, the contempt in her voice. Then I released the weapon I'd forged from her own cruelty. "You said it. She pays her own. And you're right, Lily. I pay for my soup. I pay for my house. And I protect my deed." I paused, letting the echo of her own words hit her with the full force of accumulated karma. Then I finished the sentence looking her straight in the eyes. Derek sank heavily into his chair, staring at the carpet, muttering something unintelligible about lawsuits and ruin, aware that the contractor's promissory notes would tear him apart. They were finished. The public humiliation they'd designed for me at the summit had materialized here in the heart of their greed, in front of the bankers who now regarded them with undisguised contempt. There was no need to shout. The work was done. The symmetry of the punishment was perfect. I picked up my black purse from the chair, hung it on my shoulder with elegance, and looked at Mr. Harrington. I gave him a slight nod of thanks, then I turned. I walked to the glass door, opened it with a steady hand, and left behind my daughter's sobs and the silence of her husband's ruin. Ready to step into the fresh air of a city that now belonged entirely to me. The street air hit my face the moment I crossed the heavy revolving doors of the bank. A damp, dense wind, thick with the unmistakable smell of wet asphalt and exhaust. But it reached my lungs with the pure clarity of mountain air. I stopped for a moment at the edge of the sidewalk, adjusting the strap of my black purse on my shoulder. Behind me, beyond the immense windows of the financial branch, the ruin of my daughter and son-in-law was being finalized in a soundproof office. I felt no urge whatsoever to turn and look back. The main avenue roared in front of me with the relentless mid-morning traffic, a furious river of metal tires and horns that would have deafened me entirely on any other day. But that morning it sounded like a triumphant symphony. I breathed deep, filling my chest until my ribs stretched. Then I started walking. I didn't look for the bus stop. I didn't raise my hand for a taxi. My black, square-heeled shoes, the same ones that had rung with authority across the bank's polished granite floor, now marked a constant, firm, deliberate rhythm on the uneven pavement. The dull ache in my knees, that chronic sting that used to torture me whenever I ran behind other people's schedules, had vanished completely. The adrenaline of executing my own liberation worked like the finest painkiller. I walked more than 20 blocks, crossed wide avenues and narrow alleys, absorbed every detail of the world I'd been absent from for nearly a decade. I stopped in front of store windows looking at my own reflection in the glass. The woman looking back was no longer the hunched widow ironing silk shirts at dawn. She was a woman standing tall, absolute owner of her time and her space. When I reached a tree-lined plaza at the edge of the commercial district, hunger made itself known with a deep growl from my stomach. Not the anxious hunger of someone eating cold leftovers standing in a kitchen. A real vigorous appetite. Across the street, I saw a restaurant with a sober facade. Burgundy awnings, dark wood tables on a terrace lined with potted ferns. It was called The Oak. I crossed the street and walked in without hesitation. The interior was dimly lit, serene. The soft clink of silverware against porcelain. A young waiter whose name tag read Patrick approached immediately. Perfect posture, a genuine smile. Nothing like the condescending looks I used to get when I accompanied my family to their luxury spots. He led me to a corner table beside an immense window with a perfect view of the plaza. Patrick handed me a leather-bound menu. I opened it slowly. This time my eyes did not frantically scan the prices to calculate the impact on other people's wallets. I read the descriptions of the dishes with the patience of someone reading a good novel. When Patrick returned with a pitcher of fresh water, I closed the menu and looked him in the eye. I ordered a thick cut of beef medium, with roasted asparagus and rosemary potatoes, exactly the same dish Derek had ordered that night at the summit. And to accompany it, I requested a glass of the boldest red wine they had by the glass. The food arrived on a flawless white ceramic plate. The aroma of rosemary and seared meat flooded my space. I picked up the silverware, heavy and cold in my hands, and cut the first bite. The meat melted in my mouth, juicy, perfectly seasoned. I ate slowly, savoring every fiber, chewing in absolute pleasurable silence. No conversations about interest rates to pretend I cared about. No children crying over lost toys. No demands disguised as favors. Just me enjoying the fruit of my years of work at the salon. Spending my savings on myself. When I finished, I asked for the check. Patrick brought the little black folder. I took out my debit card, the same one I'd so often drained to pay overdue electric bills for the mansion. I covered the full amount, with a generous tip. I paid my own, because indeed we were not together. Summer arrived in the neighborhood with a dry, relentless heat that cracked the garden soil and sent neighbors searching for shade. 4 long months had passed since the morning at the bank. 4 months of absolute silence from Lily. Not a phone call, not a text, not an unexpected visit. At first, the sudden absence felt strange in the body, like a persistent echo in an empty cave, an amputated habit my mind still reached for by pure inertia when the clock struck 6 in the morning. But the routine of peace is a balm that works fast and heals deep. I decided my house needed to reflect my new reality. The physical space still held ghosts of servitude. I hired a carpenter from the neighborhood, an older man meticulous named Rudy. He worked wood with the devotion of an ancient craftsman. I asked him to dismantle the guest room entirely, the room where Austin's broken toys and the boxes of old clothes Lily discarded each season had piled up. Rudy hauled everything to the curb for the collection truck. For 2 weeks, the sound of the electric saw and the smell of pine sawdust filled my home. He built floor-to-ceiling custom shelves and a wide, sturdy work table. I turned that room into a sewing and reading studio. I filled the shelves with imported yarns, heavy fabrics, and the books Ray had given me that I'd never had time to read. With money that no longer seeped into other people's luxuries, I also bought a high-end orthopedic mattress. The day the delivery men installed it in my bedroom and took away the old sunken one, I felt a cycle close. That first night, lying on the firm, cool surface, I felt my spine align. The lower back muscles tense for a full decade finally surrendered to rest. I slept 10 hours straight. Deep sleep. No nightmares of alarms ringing or pans burning. One afternoon in late October, with a gray sky threatening an early storm and the wind beginning to tear dry leaves from the trees, I was on the back porch pruning my rose bushes with new shears. I heard the metallic clang of the front doorbell. I wiped the dirt from my hands on my apron, crossed the hallway, and opened the door. Rachel. She wore her bakery apron under a wool sweater, and she carried a white cardboard box stained with sweet grease. Her face, usually smiling, wore an expression of barely contained astonishment. The face of someone carrying news too heavy to hold in a minute longer. I invited her straight into the kitchen. I made strong coffee on the stove while she opened the box to reveal a dozen freshly baked sweet corn cakes. We sat at the dining table, the same table where I'd listened to my daughter's threatening voicemails months before. Rachel sipped her coffee, blew on the steam, leaned forward on her elbows over the plastic tablecloth, and lowered her voice, as if the walls of my own house might betray her. "Dorothy, woman, you will not believe the disaster that went down in the North Zone," Rachel began, eyes wide. "You know my nephew works at the municipal impound lot, driving one of the tow trucks. Well, last night he called me scared and full of gossip. He said, 'Aunt, I just towed the truck of the husband of Dorothy's daughter.'" I held my cup halfway between the plate and my lips. The coffee steamed. I showed no surprise, just calm attention. I nodded slowly for her to continue. "Turns out the man hadn't made a payment on the vehicle in 4 months," Rachel went on, gesturing with her free hand. "The bank sent the repossession order. My nephew had to go at 2 in the morning to that glass house they were renting. He said it was a horrible scene. Neighbors came out in their pajamas. That Derek came out screaming, threatening to sue the tow truck guys, saying he was an important businessman and it was all a system error. But the papers were signed by the judge. They took the black truck right there in front of all the rich folks on the block." I took a small sip of my coffee. The dark liquid went down, warming my chest. The arrogance of that man. The same arrogance that made him honk from the street to hurry me along, that made him savor his wine while I was humiliated. It had finally crashed against the cold numbers he could no longer polish with my money. Rachel grabbed a piece of sweet corn cake, chewed quickly, and continued. "Because the story didn't end there. But that's not the worst part, Dorothy. Nora told me the rest this morning when she came to buy her rolls. Her niece works at the real estate agency that manages the houses in that subdivision. The glass house, the huge one they lived in, it's already back on the rental market. They got evicted, couldn't pay the rent since August. And as for the new house they were building in Pinecrest, total disaster." Rachel settled back in her chair, savoring her role as messenger. "Since the bank denied the mortgage credit outright, they couldn't pay the builder. The general contractor, a man who doesn't play games, sued them for breach of contract and kept the initial deposit Derek had put down. They lost all that money. They had to pull the boy out of private school because they owed tuition. They moved to a cramped 2-bedroom apartment over on Mechanic Avenue where the truck noise won't let you sleep, not even for laughs." The image of Derek, the man who despised the smell of honest coffee because it smelled poor, living above an avenue full of auto shops like the one where Ray broke his back, his whole life. The poetic justice was so sharp it nearly made me smile. But I kept my face serene. There was no joy in the fall of my own blood, only the confirmation that gravity sooner or later always does its work. "And Lily?" I asked, pronouncing my daughter's name for the first time in months. My voice came out steady, no tremor. Rachel sighed, shifting from gossip mode into something slightly darker, aware that after everything, she was talking about the daughter of the woman sitting across from her. "I saw Lily myself last Tuesday," Rachel confessed, lowering her eyes to her cup. "I'd gone downtown to buy yeast wholesale. It was pouring rain. She was standing at the bus stop on Route 52. Not wearing those fine coats from before, a plain waterproof jacket. I went over to say hello. She told me she got a job at a call center, answering phones 8 hours a day because Derek's paycheck is being garnished for credit card debts. She was soaked, waiting for a packed bus, with a tired face that broke my heart. But then I remembered what she did to you, and the pity passed quickly. They got what they sowed, Dorothy. Nothing more, nothing less. The conversation with Rachel stretched for another hour, drifting into gentler neighborhood topics. When she finally said goodbye and I closed the door behind her, I stood alone in the entryway. The house was wrapped in its usual protective silence. I walked to the living room window and looked at the street. Rain had finally begun to fall, washing the dust off the asphalt. I thought of Lily, waiting for the bus in the storm, making the exact same journey I'd made for 10 years to go serve breakfast to her son. The symmetry of fate was relentless. She'd shouted to the four winds that she paid her own way. Now life was charging her every last cent of the bill. And yet, despite the coldness with which I'd armored my heart against them, there was one link in that chain of disasters that produced a real pang of pain. Austin. The boy bore no blame for the moral rot of his parents. I knew in that cramped apartment surrounded by the frustrations and shouting of two adults drowning in debt, my grandson would suffer. But I also knew that if I reached out now, if I offered a lifeline for the boy's sake, they'd take it as weakness and drag me back to the bottom of the well. I needed to protect him. Under my own rules. On my own territory. The next morning, I dressed in my gray suit and returned to the bank branch. I asked for Lucas. The young executive received me with the same professional courtesy, offering me a seat in his cubicle. "Mrs. Brooks, what a pleasure to have you here. Would you like to review your account status or modify the security restriction on your deed?" Lucas asked, opening my file on his computer. "The restriction stays exactly where it is, Lucas. That lock doesn't come off until I die," I clarified immediately, setting my purse on my lap. "I've come to open a different financial instrument. I want to establish a closed trust fund." Lucas adjusted his glasses, intrigued. "Of course. Who will be the beneficiary of this fund?" "My grandson, Austin. I want to transfer a substantial portion of my savings into that account, but I need the clauses to be Iron Lucas, absolutely hermetic. The money will be locked, earning interest at a fixed term. Nobody, under any circumstances, not even with a court order citing a medical emergency alleged by his parents, can touch a single cent of that money. The fund releases automatically, exclusively in Austin's name on the day he turns 21, not a day earlier. And if his parents attempt to access the account, I want the system to block the attempt and notify me immediately." Lucas typed quickly, nodding with understanding. He'd seen enough of my family's dynamic to understand exactly what I was building. A vault armored against parasites. "That's a very wise decision, Mrs. Brooks. The trust will be fully protected. Young Austin will have a solid foundation for college or to start his adult life completely out of third parties' reach. I'll print the contracts for your signature." I signed the papers with immaculate handwriting. Stepping out of the bank, the sun rode high in the autumn sky. I had secured my grandson's future without handing a single gram of power to the people who raised him. The circle was finally closed. My assets were safe, my lineage protected for the long term, and my present belonged entirely to me. Time moved on, weaving the new normal of my days. Winter arrived, and with it came a particular Friday, exactly 1 year after that night at the summit. In the middle of the afternoon, I took my grocery cart and walked to the organic market that's set up in the neighborhood plaza. The cold air bit my cheeks, but I walked tall, greeting the vendors by name. I stopped at the fresh vegetable stand, bought a bunch of tender carrots, thick-stemmed leeks, white onions, and a few sprigs of fresh thyme. I went to the dairy stall and asked for a small jar of thick artisan cream and a bottle of white truffle oil, a tiny luxury that cost more than I used to spend in a week. I paid without blinking. I returned home as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of purple and orange. I turned on the heat, took off my coat, and put on a clean linen apron. I went into the kitchen, turned on the radio to a low-volume instrumental music station, and set about cooking. I washed the vegetables slowly, feeling the texture of the earth and cold water on my hands. I chopped the leeks and onions with methodical precision. In a heavy cast-iron pot, I melted a generous spoonful of real butter. Listening to the soft hiss as it met the hot metal, I added the vegetables, letting them brown slowly, releasing a deep, sweet aroma that filled every corner of the house. I added homemade chicken broth, lowered the heat to minimum. Let the mixture simmer for almost an hour. While the soup cooked, I went to the dining room. I opened the seldom-used mahogany cabinet. I took out a deep bowl of fine porcelain, decorated with a delicate border of gold leaves. Part of the china set Ray had given me for our 20th anniversary. I also took out a cut crystal glass, a heavy silver spoon, a white cotton linen napkin. I carried it all to the dining table. I didn't set the place at the corner or off to the side. I placed the placemat at the head of the table, the position that commands authority and presence in any home. I returned to the kitchen, turned off the heat, used the immersion blender, and pureed the vegetables until the texture was silky, flawless, not a single lump. I added the thick cream stirring with a wooden spoon, watching the color shift to an elegant pale ivory. I turned off the radio. The only sound left in the house was the distant murmur of wind against the closed windows. I ladled the steaming soup into the porcelain bowl. With a dropper, I let 3 perfect drops of white truffle oil fall onto the creamy surface. I placed a tiny sprig of thyme in the center as decoration. I cut a thick slice of the rustic bread Rachel had given me that morning, poured a glass of dark red wine. I walked to the dining room, carrying my dinner on a tray. I sat at the head of the table. The dark, solid wood of the chair held my back firmly. I looked at the plate in front of me. Steam rose in slow, lazy spirals toward the ceiling, carrying the intoxicating scent of truffle and butter. The house was wrapped in monumental stillness, a peace so dense I could almost touch it. No phones ringing, no truck engines revving at the curb, no one waiting for me to get up and clean up their disaster. I took the white linen napkin, unfolded it with a soft snap, and laid it across my lap, smoothing the edges over my skirt. I picked up the silver spoon. The cold metal warmed quickly against my fingers. I dipped the spoon into the exact center of the bowl, lifted a perfect portion of the cream of vegetable soup, brought it to my lips, closed my eyes. The flavor was extraordinary, rich, complex, deep. A taste that had absolutely nothing to do with that lukewarm, tasteless soup I'd swallowed between tears in the corner of a fine restaurant, surrounded by people who despised me. I swallowed slowly. The warmth of the soup comforted my stomach and my soul. I opened my eyes, looking at the expanse of my living room. The walls that belonged to me. The roof I had defended. The silence was absolute, broken only by the light, rhythmic, victorious clink of my silver spoon against the bottom of the porcelain bowl.